Before Disneyland, before Snow White, before Mickey Mouse, Walt Disney was a broke, humiliated 21-year-old who had just lost his first animation company, his entire staff, and the rights to his most popular character to a predatory distributor who knew exactly what he was doing. Most people who hit that wall at 21 never recover. Walt Disney hit it, rebuilt from nothing, got betrayed again, nearly lost everything a second time, and then created an entertainment empire so dominant that it still shapes global culture almost 70 years after his death. This is the story nobody tells when they talk about the magic of Disney. Walter Elias Disney was born in Chicago in 1901 and grew up on a farm in Missouri. From childhood he was obsessed with drawing and performance, two things his father considered useless. His father, Elias Disney, was a harsh, frugal man who believed in hard physical labor and had little patience for his son's artistic ambitions. Walt left home as a teenager, lied about his age to serve as an ambulance driver in France during the final weeks of World War I, and returned to Kansas City determined to build a career in commercial art. He had almost no money, no connections, and no formal training beyond a few night classes. What he had was an absolute refusal to accept that what he wanted was impossible. In Kansas City in 1921, Disney and a friend named UBI Works founded their first company, iWorks Disney Commercial Artists. It lasted exactly 1 month before financial pressure forced both of them to take day jobs. Disney then found work at a commercial art studio where he learned about animation, a new and rapidly growing medium. He was fascinated. Within months he had quit his job, borrowed money, and started his own animation studio called Laugh-O-Gram Films. He hired a small team, secured a contract to produce animated fairy tales for a local theater chain, and threw himself into production with the kind of total commitment that would define his entire life. Within 2 years, Laugh-O-Gram Films was bankrupt. The theater chain had gone under, the contracts evaporated, and Disney could not make payroll. He was 21 years old and completely broke. If you are drawn to stories about people who refused to quit when every rational reason to quit was right in front of them, subscribe to SnapOldBusiness. We cover the real stories behind legendary companies, the failures, the betrayals, and the moments of genius that built the brands shaping your world. Subscribe now and let us get back to Walt Disney in 1923. Arriving in Hollywood with $40 and a cardboard suitcase. Disney arrived in Los Angeles in 1923 with $40, an unfinished reel of a film he had been working on in Kansas City, and the intention of becoming a movie director. When that failed, he pivoted back to animation and convinced his brother Roy, who was recovering from tuberculosis in a veterans hospital, to go into business with him. The Disney Bros cartoon studio was launched from their uncle's garage. Walt created a new character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, which became genuinely popular through Universal Pictures. By 1927, Oswald was a hit. Disney had a staff, a growing business, and what looked like a real future. Then he traveled to New York to negotiate a better contract with his distributor, Charles Mintz, and discovered that Mintz had already hired away most of his animation staff and legally owned the Oswald character. Disney owned nothing. He had been building someone else's asset the entire time. The train ride back from New York to Los Angeles in early 1928 is one of the most consequential journeys in entertainment history. Disney sat in his compartment, staring out the window, and began designing a replacement for Oswald. A mouse, he called it Mortimer. His wife Lillian talked him out of the name and suggested Mickey instead. Disney sketched the character obsessively during the journey, working out the personality, the proportions, the expressive quality that would make this mouse different from anything audiences had seen. He arrived in Los Angeles with Mickey Mouse essentially complete. He had turned one of the worst professional betrayals of his career into his most valuable creation. The first two Mickey Mouse cartoons, Plain Crazy and Gallopin' Gaucho, were silent films that failed to find a distributor. Then Disney made a decision that would separate him permanently from every competitor in the animation business. He had seen The Jazz Singer, the first commercially successful sound film, released in 1927, and understood immediately that sound would transform cinema. He produced a third Mickey Mouse cartoon called Steamboat Willie and synchronized it to a full musical score and sound effects, something that had never been done in animation before. Steamboat Willie premiered in New York on November 18, 1928, and was an immediate sensation. Mickey Mouse was a star overnight. The success of Steamboat Willie gave Disney the momentum to pursue something even more ambitious. Most studio executives in Hollywood considered the idea of a feature-length animated film to be financially insane. Animation was expensive, time-consuming, and technically fragile. A full-length animated feature would take years and cost more money than any animation studio had ever spent on a single project. Industry insiders called it Disney's Folly. Disney called it Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and he spent 4 years and over $1.5 million making it, at a time when his entire studio was worth less than that. He mortgaged everything. He borrowed against future revenues that did not yet exist. His own brother thought he had lost his mind. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered on December 21, 1937, at the Cathay Circle Theater in Hollywood. The audience, which included some of the biggest names in Hollywood, gave it a standing ovation. It earned over $8 million in its initial release, making it the most commercially successful sound film ever produced up to that point. Disney used the profits to build an entirely new studio complex in Burbank, which the company still occupies today. Snow White had not just saved his company, it had proven that feature-length animation was a legitimate art form and a legitimate business, something no one had believed before Disney demonstrated it. The years between Snow White and the end of World War II were among the most difficult of Disney's career, despite the critical success of his films. Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Bambi, all considered masterpieces today, were commercial disappointments on their initial releases, partly because the European market, which Disney depended on heavily, was closed by the war. The studio went into serious debt. Labor strikes tore the workforce apart in 1941, with animators walking out over wages and working conditions in scenes that Disney found personally devastating. He had thought of his studio as a family. The strike made clear that his employees thought of it as a corporation. By the early 1940s, Disney was again facing genuine financial collapse. Disney survived the war years by taking government contracts to produce training films and propaganda shorts, work that was creatively unrewarding but financially essential. When the war ended and the European market reopened, the studio began recovering, but Disney was already thinking beyond the animation studio model that had defined his career. He had a new obsession: a park. Not just an amusement park, but something he called an environment. A place where the storytelling of his films could exist in 3 dimensions, where families could enter the world of the movies and walk around inside it. His brother Roy thought it was another financial catastrophe waiting to happen. His own studio board refused to fund it. To fund Disneyland, Disney did something no major entertainment figure had done before. He went to television. In 1954, television was widely considered beneath the dignity of Hollywood studios. Disney negotiated a deal with ABC Network to produce a weekly television show called Disneyland, which would promote the park before it opened and provide a revenue stream to fund construction. In exchange, ABC invested in the park itself. The arrangement was dismissed by other Hollywood studios as desperate and foolish. In reality, it was a masterpiece of cross-media promotion that would not be fully understood or replicated by competitors for decades. Disney had invented the entertainment franchise before the word existed. Disneyland opened on July 17, 1955, in Anaheim, California. The opening day was broadcast live on ABC and watched by approximately 90 million people, more than half the population of the United States. The park itself had significant problems on opening day. The asphalt was fresh and heels sank into it in the California heat. A plumber's strike meant working fountains or working bathrooms, but not both, and some rides broke down. Critics called it Black Sunday. Disney called it a soft opening and fixed every problem within days. Within its first year, Disneyland attracted over 3.5 million visitors and became the most profitable entertainment venue in America. What made Disneyland revolutionary was not the rides, but the concept of total environmental control. Every detail of the visitor experience was designed and managed. Trash cans were placed every 30 feet because Disney had studied how far people would walk before dropping litter on the ground. Cast members, never employees, followed detailed behavioral scripts. The sightlines were engineered so that you could never see one themed area from another. The railroad that circled the park served as both attraction and barrier, preventing the outside world from being visible to guests inside. Disney had essentially invented the immersive experience as a commercial product, 60 years before anyone used that phrase. The financial architecture of Disney's empire was as carefully engineered as the park itself. Disney understood early that his characters were not just creative assets, they were commercial licenses. Mickey Mouse merchandise had been generating revenue since the early 1930s, when a businessman named Herman Kay paid $300 to put Mickey on school tablets and generated enormous returns. By the time Disneyland opened, Disney had licensing agreements covering everything from watches to lunchboxes to breakfast cereal. The characters generated revenue in every medium simultaneously: films, television, merchandise, live experiences. This multi-channel monetization of a single intellectual property was something no entertainment company had ever done at this scale. Walt Disney died of lung cancer on December 15, 1966, at the age of 65. He had been a heavy smoker for most of his adult life. He died before Disney World in Florida. His most ambitious project was completed. He died before Epcot. His vision of an experimental city of the future could be built. He died with enormous ambitions, still unrealized, and an empire still in the process of being constructed. His brother Roy, who had been planning to retire, stayed on specifically to see Walt Disney World through to completion. It opened on October 1, 1971, 5 years after Walt's death. Roy died 2 months later. The two brothers had spent their entire adult lives building something together, and Roy waited just long enough to see the last piece of it open. The company Walt Disney built has since become something that would likely astonish even him. It acquired ABC in 1996, Pixar in 2006, Marvel in 2009, and Lucasfilm in 2012. The Marvel acquisition alone has generated over $30 billion in box office revenue. Disney Plus, launched in 2019, reached 100 million subscribers faster than any streaming service in history. The company that began in a garage in 1923 now controls more beloved intellectual property than any entertainment organization in human history. It is worth well over $200 billion. And the character that started it all, the mouse sketched on a train from New York to Los Angeles by a 26-year-old who had just lost everything, is still the symbol at the center of it. 3 lessons from Walt Disney's story that every founder needs to understand. First, own your characters, own your business. The Oswald, the Lucky Rabbit disaster taught Disney the most expensive lesson of his career at the cheapest possible price. He never again created a character or a story that he did not fully own. Intellectual property is a business asset. If you build your entire operation on someone else's platform, someone else's algorithm, or someone else's distribution, you are building on rented land. Second, the biggest creative failures are often the most important financial investments. Fantasia and Pinocchio lost money on release. They are now considered masterpieces and generate licensing revenue continuously. The films that seem too ambitious, too expensive, and too risky are precisely the ones that define a company's identity for generations. Third, control the experience, not just the product. Disneyland was not more successful than competing amusement parks because it had better rides. It was more successful because Disney controlled every element of how visitors felt from the moment they arrived to the moment they left. Whoever controls the experience controls the value. What is most striking about Disney's story when you look at it clearly is how many times it should have ended. The Kansas City bankruptcy at 21, the Oswald betrayal at 26, the commercial failures of Pinocchio and Fantasia, the labor strikes, the wartime debt. Any one of these moments would have been sufficient to end a less determined career. What kept Disney going was not optimism in the simple sense. He was frequently depressed, anxious, and difficult to work with, but an absolute certainty that the thing he was trying to create was worth creating, and that the obstacles between him and that thing were temporary. That certainty, stubborn, sometimes irrational, occasionally infuriating to everyone around him, is the thing that all the Disney theme parks and all the Disney films were ultimately built on. Walt Disney arrived in Hollywood at 21 with $40 and a cardboard suitcase. He was broke twice before he was 30. He was betrayed by the distributor who owned his most popular character. He was told that Snow White would bankrupt him, that Disneyland was a foolish fantasy, that television was beneath him. He ignored every single warning. The empire he built now shapes the imagination of children on every continent, and it started on a train, with a sketch of a mouse, by a man who had just lost everything and was refusing, one more time, to stay lost. Subscribe if this story was worth your time. I will see you in the next one.